Okay. Well, first of all, Dr. Carlisle, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for helping me to go through the entire coaching cycle by agreeing to allow me to come into your classroom outside of a normal observation and look for some things that we discussed in our pre-observation or pre-coaching cycle conversation. One of the things that you mentioned that you wanted to work on or wanted me to look for is how you transition from one activity in the classroom to another.
Correct.
So I was able to come into your classroom on the 27th of January and take a look at some things. I've got some notes, and I'll just walk you through some of the things that I saw, and we'll have conversation about what any next steps might be from this opportunity. I did get into the classroom at about 8:21. And I've drawn for you this little diagram, and we'll walk through it. When I came in, the students were working on a blog, and you were moving them to being able to create a bar graph in a Microsoft Excel project or database. That was at 8:21. At 8:32, you transitioned into practice problem 2. And what I've noted here for you is where you are in the classroom at these particular times, and then we'll talk about the transitions. So at 8:21, when I came in, you were here at the front of the room, and I've just put a little T for teacher and the time. At 8:32, you walked to the back of the room, and this is over near where your workstation is, between the sections. You moved them to practice problem 2, and you said that you're going to discuss some possible challenges that the students may have had with that problem, and you asked the students, did anyone have a problem? And from that, you then moved to explaining what columns would be set up.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm not sure, did I give them a chance to respond as far as what problems they had?
No.
No. Okay.
So, you know, they're working on the blog, and that was independent activity from the practice problem. You introduced what they were going to do, but there was no wait time.
Okay.
You then went on to explain what is in the columns so that the students can begin creating charts. And you said simply do what, and I waited, but you didn't call specifically on a student to indicate to them what you wanted them to do. One of the children in the classroom did ask a question, but it wasn't heard by everybody in the classroom. I could barely hear it, so I couldn't write down the question, but you then said, the next chart is what? Who can help me walk through this chart? You called on a student did have the opportunity to explain that, and then you said to the class, is that correct? Did everyone hear what he said? Then you jumped into another explanation. But in terms of did anyone hear what he said, that could have transitioned or could not have transitioned, but there was no wait time there.
Okay.
You went on to begin a conversation on clarifying misconceptions. You asked, what is wrong with my chart? And you had a demonstration model up for them. We're now right at about 8:34, 8:35. When you asked what is wrong with your chart, you continued to talk. What do you think, what do you glean from that?
That I have to be cognizant of wait time for the students. Because this is for the third time that I didn't give them the wait time to process so they could respond.
You're asking very, very good questions. And I could look around and glean from the students, because they're actively engaged, sitting on the edge of their seat, but there was no opportunity for them to respond. You went on to ask another question. You turned to a student to explain something, but everybody couldn't hear that question that the student was asking. So again, if there were any misconceptions or an opportunity to transition into a conversation to clear up any misconceptions, the students didn't have that opportunity. there was no wait time and the opportunity to look around and engage. At 8:38, you were moving from assignment 2, and you had moved towards the middle of the classroom at that time, and then you started talking to them about sheet number 4. So it was a very small 30-second or so, maybe 45 seconds of talking about assignment 2, and then you transitioned very quickly into moving to sheet 4, but it was difficult to document whether or not the students had an opportunity to even give you well, they didn't have the time to give you feedback on assignment 2 before you moved to sheet 4.
Okay.
So you had moved to another part of the classroom, moved to sheet 4, and during that time, as you're moving to this section of the classroom, you inquired of them about activity 3.
Okay.
Now, I didn't want to stop and ask questions, but do these activities flow together? Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. The activity 1, 2, and 3 were activities that they performed in the previous class. So I gave them time in this class to finish up any activities, any parts of those activities they did not finish. And so we were jumping because they had already had class time to work on those assignments.
Okay.
So that was a little bit, fast because it was basically going back over prior lecture and prior information they had worked on before we moved into the new material.
Okay. Well, from 8:21 to right at about 8:38, moving into 8:42, because you're getting ready to show and demonstrate how to add borders. As we think about your positioning in the classroom and the transitions just this far, do you have any suggestions, any thoughts about what we could do?
Well, one, I tried to move around and position myself to where I can see monitors
Right,
without actually having to go down each aisle.
right.
And so one of the things that I do, I move from one section to the next section to try to see the maximum amount of monitors that I can see. Of course, that will be once we finish getting vision installed, then it'll actually show on the screen as well,
Okay.
so that I can be a little bit more stationary and not as moving at such a rapid pace. But what I try to do is see on the monitors if everyone is at about the same place in the Excel spreadsheet. If they have accomplished, if I see the colors, then I know everybody's at about the same place. If I see someone lagging behind, then I try to move closer to that person,
Okay.
so that if they have questions, I'm near to ask questions.
Okay. Well, moving on at 8:38, we're moving into activity sheet number 4. You kind of make reference to activity sheet number 3. Then you state that they're going to move back to 3. At that time, a glean across the room, it was kind of difficult to determine if all the students understood the transition from where we were going to go back to another activity. Then you said change to sheet 4 and. One of the students in the class at that time raises their hand for clarification. You explained to that child, but your back was to the classroom. Again, it could have, how we think about the transitioning in the clarification component, I didn't hear the explanation. I do know that one child got their question answered, but the question could have been something that maybe other children in the class did have as well.
Okay.
You paused for a moment at that time, and then you said, we're going to do this together. You asked the question, who can remember how to change the color of columns? A student responded, and at that time, you're still at the front of the classroom. Your response was to primarily the front of the classroom. You proceeded to explain how to change colors. Many of the students were following along. I could see from where I was sitting the screens that they were on, and it appeared that they were understanding. They were all working and really trying to engage and follow what you were doing at the front of the classroom, because the majority of the time was spent here. And one of the things to note is, in a transition, is positioning something that we want to consider so that you can have a sense of just a sense of knowing that the students have it, or at least you can know when to stop if somebody doesn't, or, you know, what portion of the children don't. At 8:42, you proceed with instruction. You're now modeling the expectation. Some of the questions that you ask are more unison response questions. Again, for clarity, as we think about the transitions, as we think about the change in activity, because at this point you are allowing them to start moving on with the activity, to clarify or at least make certain that they understand, what do you think that we could do? Is what I would think about, you know, in that transition, just to clarify and clear up misconceptions. And giving opportunities during the transitions for students to give feedback, because you had multiple transitions during this lesson between 8:21 and 8:56. The majority of the time when you were going through a transition, thinking about ways to clarify that there's a change that's about to occur, and maybe what they're working on to what you're going to transition to. So talk to me about what your thoughts are on that, or what we can plan as next steps so that we can observe and make those transitions smoother for the students, so that they understand from one activity to the next what the expectation is, but then that you need to have the opportunity to be able to see if everybody is getting it.
I think that during the transition, as I'm, in my mind, setting the expectation for what the next activity is going to be, maybe have a student to recite or to call back what that expectation is, and then make sure that the students understand. So I'm thinking that if I get them engaged in dialogue to make sure that they have it clarified, and then I can hear in their own words what they're hearing me say, as far as what the expectations are with the next activity, or what we're transitioning to, or what the next event might be.
On the average, how many transitions or how many change of activities do you have in any given course, period, section, or 90-minute section?
In a 90-minute block, we may transition 8 times to 8 different activities. So I try to break it up into small chunks, from the journal writing to a hands-on experience to lecture notes, so they're not spending a lot of time doing one activity. It's constantly changing, and so they can remain engaged in the learning process. So we may do a hands-on activity, then we may take some notes, then we may watch a video, and then from that video we may have another activity or a lecture that'll go along with that, so that they're constantly moving and changing the sheets or the activity or the spreadsheet. And so the expectations are going to change constantly in the class as each activity changes. The level of conversation, you know, whether or not they're going to get up and move, all of that changes in the classroom constantly.
I appreciate that, and I think that for the students of this age group, multiple opportunities to demonstrate understanding and learning is great for them. As we walk through this cycle, what strategies can we implement in the classroom to help them to better understand that transitions are going to occur?
I think one of the important things in the takeaway would be the wait time, to be more aware of the wait time that I'm giving the students to process the information, to process the expectation, and giving them an opportunity, or more of an opportunity, to provide feedback, whether that's clarifying the expectations, restating the expectations, or whether that's actually making sure that when questions are called out, even though I hear the question, being cognizant that the student at the back of the classroom or the student furthest away may not actually hear the question, so that I can make sure that either they restate the question louder or I restate the question for the student, so that all of the students can make sure they have an understanding on that question.
Okay. And one thing that, especially for students as we teach them, and your activity was on, you know, building the calendar. As you look at the board configuration or what's happening in the classroom, do you have any suggestions or recommendations? And you are set within certain parameters, not having that software to be able to see what they're doing. But do you have any thoughts on what you can do to help them to kind of map out what's going to happen in your classroom? Especially for your visual learners like me, if I can look and see, okay, we're going to go this, we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's right there, at least at the end of the class period, I know if you had 8 things or 8 transitions or 8 opportunities to learn a different concept, I can look and think in my head, well, I know I got 6 out of the 8, so I know what to kind of focus on for self. Do you have any thoughts on what you could do to possibly incorporate something like that into your classroom?
Well, one of the things that I do, the lecture notes are all in PowerPoint, and I save it in the share drive. So the students are able to go to the share drive and pull the lecture note, either that we're going over now or a previous lecture note. So they can actually walk through the PowerPoint, or those who work ahead can look ahead a slide or two to see what's coming next to
Okay.
prepare themselves. So sometimes in the class you'll hear, I ask a question, I say, well, this person can't answer because they're looking at the lecture notes. I mean, they've seen the slide previous, the next slide, so they know what the anticipated answer is going to be. And I want the students to actually make that connection without seeing the answer on the PowerPoint.
Okay.
So for those who are more visual, they can actually pull up the PowerPoint on their own personal computer and follow along with me, or actually work ahead a little bit.
Excellent. With the PowerPoint, does it let them know that they're transitioning to another activity? How do you mark that, or how is that notated so that they know, okay, this is one thing that I've done. Oh, and this slide indicates, how do I know that there's a transition? How do I know that there's a change in that?
I'm not sure if in the PowerPoint it would be a great indicator, because usually that's as I take them through the transition. But that'll be something to note, to actually put into the PowerPoint, that this is a transition point.
Do you think that by noting it in the PowerPoint, because you've mapped that out in your mind to prepare for your lesson, it might make you more cognizant of the wait time opportunities, of an opportunity to slow it down so that you can explain that now we're moving to this, so that students can kind of mentally know that they've come to the end of an activity, maybe even a reflection piece to write down if I have any questions for you, my instructor.
A great idea. Maybe like a digital parking lot.
I'm gonna write that down, because I think that that would be something great to see, coming back into the classroom, to incorporate that into the lesson itself, and to train the students to know that that's something that I can do, but also to mentally slow you down so that they know that you're moving from one activity to the next, because you did cover quite a bit. They're very excited. As the class wrapped up, at about 8:52, you started to move around. 8:56, you were circulating the classroom, which if you could even have checkpoints for yourself to stop and do that, I think that that could possibly even slow down the transition time, to give you an opportunity to give the students the opportunity to clear up any misconceptions by being able to ask you questions and have that wait time. The engagement was great during the entire lesson. They were all following along. They were all doing something. But I think to have those checkpoints during the transitions as check for understandings, and opportunities to do a little mini assessment might be something that you think about too, as you plan how you're going to create this digital drop box or digital parking lot.
Okay.
We'll schedule an opportunity for me to come back and see you implement some of these strategies in the classroom. And again, I thank you for allowing me to work with you in this instructional coaching cycle to better enhance what's going on in your classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.